Hi, and welcome back to this web development series. Today we'll just be bringing up a little topic of block level elements and inline elements before we move on to CSS, which will be quite a long and quite in-depth series on CSS. Uh, but a few things you might notice that is different from our usual framework that we use is we have a little attribute here known as lang and then equals en. Pretty much what this means is it'll tell the browser that the document that it is receiving is in English. So when you get the pop-up that says, hey, we can translate this to whatever your native tongue is, it's because we have declared this attribute. You don't always need it. Your company policies or your team will discuss this kind of thing before you start putting code in documents. Another new tag is this meta char set. That just defines the character encoding scheme we use. UTF-8 is the default. Just on, I'm guessing, some older devices or browsers or older standards, you might need to declare this kind of thing. Again, your wireframing document and your team will have discussed whether this is the kind of thing we need to include or not. It doesn't hurt to put it in, but it's just a new thing. Anyway, that out of the way, let's get into what block and inline elements are. A block element is just an element that will have its own space in a browser document. So a header is its own block spaced element, which is why it's called a block. So when we define a header, it'll have space before it, so there'll be a little bit of a gap in the web browser, and some space after it before we encounter something like the paragraph. An inline element is something that will encompass some data and change the way it looks. In this case, the EM, which will just italicize all these words. But anyway, if we open this document, we'll have a bit of a better view of what I'm talking about. So this header is a block level element. It's its own thing. When we highlight it, it only highlights that block, for example. So it's its own thing, and we can add style attributes to this, or when we move on to CSS in the next video, quite a few videos, it's going to be an in-depth series on that. It will affect a block element, or we can make it affect inline elements, but we'll get to that. And in HTML, at least when we use block level and inline encoding for style, inline elements can only come, or can exist in block elements, but block elements can't exist in inline elements. So we can have this EM tag inside of this paragraph tag, but we cannot put a paragraph tag in an EM tag. CSS has no such limitations on having inline and block elements nested in each other in certain ways. Again, we'll cover that. But just something to keep in mind with HTML, that inline elements can only exist in block elements, and block elements can't exist in inline elements. But anyway, I hope this made sense. It might become a little bit clearer as we move on to some of the styling in CSS in the next video. But for now, create some of these block level elements. You can search for some inline element tags. Again, there are quite a few HTML tags, and we have certainly not covered all of them. We'll continue covering them as we move on in CSS, but I want to move on to that part of the series before we just spend forever on every single HTML tag and what it can mean and contain. But thank you so much for viewing, and I'll see you in the next video.